Hi there, Morganite here. Today we're talking about hand traps that are actually trap cards. What do I mean by this? A hand trap is a card that can be activated from the hand once certain conditions are met, usually when your opponent activates a card or effect. Usually a hand trap is a monster card, however there are some exceptions, and we're going to be talking about them today. First off, let's talk about Typhoon. Target one face-up spell trap on the field and destroy it. Decent effect, let's hear the condition. If your opponent controls 2 or more spell traps and you control no spell trap cards, you can activate this card from your hand. This is where things get a bit iffy. While the effect is okay, target one face-up spell trap on the field and destroy it, being able to stop your opponent from using field spells or continuous spells, the fact that your opponent has to control 2 or more spell trap cards on the field before you can activate this card kind of makes it a bit bad. However, considering this card was the 3rd hand trap that was a trap to be printed, it's understandable why they overbalanced it a bit. However, it still doesn't escape the fact that it is a bad card. Now onto something that's infinitely better, Infinite Impermanence. Target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of your turn, then, if this card was set before activation, and is on the field at resolution, for the rest of this turn, all other spell traps in this column are negated, and it can be activated from the hand if you control no cards. So what makes Infinite Impermanence so good? Well, 1-for-1 boss negation is already a decent effect. The fact that you can activate this during your opponent's turn if you're going second, or set this card face down while you're going first to perhaps negate not only a monster negate but a spell trap negate on your opponent's first turn, is also pretty spectacular. This column negation is also quite scary, to the point where it actually changes how people play the game. Nowadays, you don't actually activate spell trap cards in the same column as an opponent's set spell trap card, just in case it is an Infinite Impermanence. After all, if that happens, not only are they negating your monster effect, but also the spell or trap card you just played, which is bad. Now honestly, it is a fantastic card. One monster negate isn't going to stop your opponent from comboing off. After all, most decks these days can't play through a single negate. If we want to even the playing field, we're going to play something else. Evenly Match is a card that can, at the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, make your opponent banish cards from their field face down so they control the same number of cards as you do. And, just like Imperm, can be activated from the hand if you control no cards. This card is really good. Not only is it functionally a board wipe on your opponent, it is somewhat balanced by the fact that you have to give up your battle phase, which means that you won't be able to deal any damage to your opponent via battle during the same turn you activate Evenly Matched. One of the main drawbacks to Evenly Matched though is that your opponent can choose which card they leave on the field. Chances are they'll leave something like a Appaloosa or a Baronne de Fleur, something with negates that will make it harder for you to play through your main phase too. However, you can get around this simply by playing a Nibiru. Nibiru summons out a token to your opponent's side of the field. This works well with Evenly Matched because tokens can't be banished face down, so your opponent has to choose cards that aren't the token. Evenly Matched also works well if you're playing an opponent that summons out multiple towers like monsters, cards that are unaffected by the card effects, as Evenly Matched doesn't affect the cards themselves, but the player who controls those cards, your opponent. As such, your opponent will have to bash at least one of these towers face down in order to fulfill the conditions of Evenly Matched, and you can imagine after doing that, your opponent will be seeing red. Red Reboot is a counter trap that can be activated when your opponent activates a trap card. You negate the activation of that trap card, set it back face down, then your opponent can set one other trap card directly from the deck. However, for the rest of the turn, after this card resolves, your opponent cannot activate any trap cards. Red Reboot can also be activated from your hand by paying half your life points. I guess Red Reboot is decent. I wasn't exactly looking at competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! At the time Red Reboot was printed, till when it got banned in TCG. So I don't exactly know why it is actually banned. It could be because trap cards are already slow enough, and having a counter that exclusively works against trap cards, which are one of the slowest forms of cards within the game, seems like punching downwards. And that's not really something you really want to do. So you can understand the impulse in purging this card. Speaking of Dominus Impulse and Dominus Purge. These cards can be activated from the hand, however for the rest of the duel, you can't activate the effects of monsters with certain attributes. Dominus Impulse prevents you from activating light, earth or wind monsters if you activate it from hand. Dominus Purge does the other 3 types, dark, water and fire. Luckily, you can still use monsters of the divine attribute. Dominus Purge can negate an effect that adds a card from deck to hand. Then, if you got a trap card in your deck, you can destroy that card. Dominus Impulse on the other hand can negate an effect that special summons a monster. And likewise, if you have a trap card in your graveyard, you can destroy that card. Both of these cards can also be activated from the hand if your opponent controls the card. Which is, like, at any time, if you think about it. The only way your opponent would be able to activate a card or effect without controlling a card on the field is if that card or effect would be from the graveyard or banishment, or in the hand, which isn't exactly unlikely, but at the same time, is also pretty uncommon. The last card in this trio is Songs of Dominance. If you control no monsters in your graveyard, you can activate this card from your hand. When your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, negate that effect, then, if you have a trap card in your graveyard, you can add one Dominus card from your deck to your hand. However, if you activate this card from your hand, you can't activate monster effects in the hand, graveyard, and banishment until the end of the next turn. This card's a bit of a doozy. Not only is it just effect negation, similar to what Infinite Impermanence does, it also prevents you from using monster effects until the end of the next turn, which means if you're going second, no hand traps on the first turn, and a limited ability to combo off going second. You can still use monster effects on the field, but everywhere else, you can't activate monster effects. Except for probably the deck, but the amount of cards that can actually activate from deck is very few. The last one of the generic hand traps that actually are trap cards is Harpie's Featherstorm. While not exactly generic, it is more generic than the next examples that we got on this list. Harpie's Featherstorm requires you to control a Wind-Winged Beast monster. If you do, until the end of this turn, negate any monster effects your opponent activates. Here's the thing, I bet you most of you didn't actually know this was a hand trap. Most people have seen this card when played with Fluundereeze or Simorg. However, if you control a Harpie monster, you can activate this card from your hand. Pretty decent, right? If you slash in a small Harpie engine, or just a couple of Harpie cards, you can activate this card from your hand. Also, if this card is destroyed on the field by an opponent's card effect, you can add one Harpie's Feather Duster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. I think this card's a better Infinite Impermanence, but with less flexibility. You can only really play it in certain decks. You only get the hand trap ability off it if you're playing certain cards. However, there is also an incentive to set it. Harpie's Feather Duster is still a pretty decent card, depending on which decks you're matching up. Being able to get rid of all your opponent's spell and trap cards in one go, it's a crazy effect. Way better than Typhoon. And the fact that you can just cancel your opponent's monster effects for the rest of a turn is hugely powerful. Remember, this is a drawback for Songs of Dominance. So yeah, that's the end of the generic hand traps that are actually trap cards. Everything else on this list is more archetype specific. So yeah, let's see what we got next. It's Next! Next can be activated from your hand if you control no cards. Special summons many monsters with different names from your hand in or graveyard in defense position that are either Neo-Spacian monsters or Elemental Hero Neos, but negate their effects as long as you control any of those special summon monsters. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters. Yeah, this card's kinda bad. I guess it's kinda there for just fan service. If you're a fan of the GX anime, you can make the Elemental Hero Neos fusion monsters, but yeah, apart from that, wouldn't really play this card. Then again, it is archetypal support, so it's probably really good within Neo-Spacian decks. Up next we got the Blackwings. First up we'll talk about Black Sonic, as well as Delta Crow Anti-Reverse. These cards were both number 2 and number 1 when it comes to printing of hand traps that are actually trap cards. That's right, hand traps that are actually trap cards were originally Blackwing support. We'll start off with number 1, Delta Crow Anti-Reverse. If you control a Blackwing monster, destroy all face-down spell traps your opponent controls. Decent effect, especially during its time, 2009. Battle traps have definitely been a difficult obstacle to climb over. Speaking of battle traps, Black Sonic. When an opponent's monster declares an attack on a Blackwing monster you control, banish all face-up attack position monsters your opponent controls. This is so much more powerful than a Mirror Force. And, if you're playing Blackwings, that condition doesn't even matter. After all your monsters are going to be Blackwing monsters. Both of these cards can be activated from the hand if you control exactly 3 Blackwing monsters. However, Black Sonic states that you have to control no other monsters as well. These two aren't the only hand traps that are also trap cards that are built for the Blackwing archetype. We also got Blackwing Twin Shadow, which can shuffle 2 of your Blackwing monsters, one tuner and non-tuner that are banished or in your graveyard, into your decks, to basically synchro summon a Blackwing synchro monster. You can also activate this card from your hand if you control 2 or more Blackwing monsters, which in Blackwings is as easy as breathing. And lastly, we got ourselves Blackbird Close, a counter trap card. When an opponent's monster activates its effect, you can send one face-up Blackwing monster you control to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Then you can special summon out one Blackwing Dragon from the extra deck. This card can also be activated from the hand if you control a Blackwing Synchro monster or Blackwing Dragon. So yeah, this is basically Solemn Strike for your Blackwing deck, but without having to pay for life points. Up next, we're going to be looking at a different archetype, the Tachyons. We got Tachyon Spiral Galaxy, Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy, as well as Tachyon Transmigration. All three of these cards can be activated from the hand if you control a Galaxy Eyes Tachyon Dragon monster. So let's start with Spiral Galaxy. Target one Dragon Galaxy monster you control until the end of its turn, can't be destroyed by battle. It's also unaffected by other card effects except its own. This just prevents your opponent from getting rid of a Galaxy monster. Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy. During the battle phase, detach one material from your Galaxy Eyes Xyz monster, shuffle all monsters your opponent controls into the deck that will normal or special summon this turn. Also, if you control a number C monster, this card's effect and activation can't be negated. That's an insanely powerful card. And lastly, Tachyon Transmigration, the final counter trap that we'll be looking at today. If you control a Galaxy Eyes monster, activate this card as Chain Link to or higher, negate the activations of your opponent's spell trap cards and monster effects activated before this card in chain, and if you do, shuffle the negated cards into the deck. Once again, just non-targeting, non-destruction removal. Fantastic cards. Up next, we got Zefra War. You can target one other Zefra card you control and one card your opponent controls, destroy them. If you have two Zefra cards in your pendulum zones, you can activate this card from your hand. Up next, we got the Phantasm Spiral cards, Battle, Power, and Assault. These cards can all be activated from the hand if Umi is on the field, which is pretty easy considering there are a lot of Umi cards. Battle can target one card your opponent controls and destroy it, while Power can target one effect monster your opponent controls. Until the end of the turn, it loses 1000 attack and defense, and it has its effects negated. These two cards also have graveyard effects. You can banish Power from the graveyard, then target one normal monster you control, equip one Phantasm Spiral equipped spell card from your hand or graveyard to that normal monster. Battle, on the other hand, can banish itself from the graveyard to target one normal monster you control, equip that normal monster with all Phantasm Spiral equipped spell cards you control. And now, Assault. Target one Phantasm Spiral Dragon you control. When it destroys 3 monsters your opponent controls by battle, while equipped with 3 or more Phantasm Spiral equipped spell cards with different names, you win the duel. That's right, this is a hand trap that actually can win the game, through an alt condition. Its graveyard effect is if a normal monster you control would be destroyed by battle on card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. One thing you should know about this win condition is that it's a lingering effect. You can target one Phantasm Spiral Dragon you control, with 0 cards equipped to it, and the effect will still go off. All you need to do is equip cards to that monster, attack your opponent's monsters 3 times, and destroy them to win the duel. With that being said, you don't usually play this card within Phantasm Spiral decks. If you get to the point in a duel where your opponent's letting you keep a 2900 attack point monster on the field, with 3 equips on it, while also running over your monsters, chances are you've already won the duel at that point. And lastly, let's talk about the Marincess cards. We got Marincess Wave, Current, Circulation, and Cascade. All 3 of these cards can be activated from the hand if you control a Link 3 or higher Marincess monster. First up, let's look at Marincess Wave, the bane of my existence. If you control a Marincess Link monster, target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate that face-up monster's effects until the end of the turn. Then, if you control a Link 2 or higher Marincess monster, all face-up monsters you currently control are unaffected by your opponent's card effects until the end of the turn. Not only is this an Impermanence effect negation, it also just blanket protects all your Marincess monsters, which honestly is pretty easy to get to like a Link 2 or higher Marincess monster. That's kind of how the deck runs. As such, if you let your opponent get to a Link 3 or higher Marincess monster, the game's probably over. Up next, let's look at some of the other Marincess cards that I haven't seen played within Marincess decks. We got Current, which is a burn card. When a Marincess Link monster you control destroys an opponent's monster by battle, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the Link rating of that monster you control times 400. Then, if you destroy an opponent's Link monster by that battle, while you control a Link 2 or higher Marincess monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that destroyed monster's Link rating times 500. So if your Link 4 monster attacked and destroyed an opponent's Link 4 monster, you're burning them for 3600 life points, which is a pretty big deal. Up next, Circulation. Target one water Link monster you control, return it to the extra deck, and if you do, special summon a Marincess Link monster from the extra deck with the same Link rating but a different name, but it can't attack directly or be destroyed by battle this turn. And this is also treated as a Link summon. Actually, this card seems pretty good. I'm pretty sure they play this card in Marincess. Being able to side link it to the same Link rating as the Link monster you control is a pretty decent effect. Goodness knows if we could do that with Xyz monsters or Synchro monsters. Well, we used to be able to do it with Synchro monsters actually, until they banned Level Eater for Link shenanigans. But that's a story for a different day. Let's look at our last card, Marincess Cascade. Banish any number of Marincess linked monsters you control until the next standby phase, then target one face-up monster on the field. It gains attack equal to the total link rating of the monsters you just banished to activate this card times 300 until the end of the turn. Huh, what a lackluster card to end this on. Like, it's okay, but it seems more like an anime card rather than something you'd actually play in a tournament. I remember that I created this statistics page, kind of like made everything into a table. Got all the hand traps that are trap cards, or trap cards you can activate from the hand, in a table, all 24 of them. Got them sorted out by the name, what set they initially released in, the year that set got released, and how many times that card's been printed. Just thought it'd be fun to look at the data, so yeah, let's look at it. So first off, we can go through which sets had the most of these cards. Surprisingly enough, a lot of sets only released one hand trap that is a trap card, so don't really have a third place for this list, but in second place, three-way tie, we got Chaos Impact, Flames of Destruction, and Rising Rampage, all containing 2 of these trap cards. In first place, we got Maximum Crisis, with 4 of them. This kind of makes sense. Maximum Crisis contained the Phantasm Spiral trap cards, Assault, Battle, and Power, but it also had Zefra War. It also makes it fitting that 2017, the year that Maximum Crisis released, also saw the most amount of these cards being released, with that number being 6. In second place, we got 2019 at 5, and third place is 2018 at 3. It's kind of funny how these years are, sequential, not in order, but they are still sequential, 17, 18, 19. What's also funny is that these 3 years are also responsible for the most amounts of hand traps that are trap cards, totaling in at 14. For context, the last previous 3 years for us, 2023 to now, we've only seen 4 hand traps that are trap cards being released. That's because in 2023, none of them were released. The same thing can be said for 2020, 2021, as well as 2016. And of course the years between 2009 and 2014, when they haven't really played around with the concept too much. And lastly, let's talk about which cards got the most prints. In first place, we got Infinite Impermanence, with 10 prints. If you play any version of this card game, you'll know just how important Infinite Impermanence is as a card, how good it is, so it makes sense that it's got that many prints. Though, it was a card released in 2018, and it's 2025, which means it's got more prints than it does years being available. So some years it got printed out multiple times. Second place, we got Evenly Matched at 7. Evenly Matched came out in 2017, so that roughly works out to around about 1 a year. And in third place, we got 3 cards, Red Reboot, Delta Crow Anti-Reverse, and Tachyon Transmigration. Each of these cards getting printed a total of 5 times. Delta Crow and Tachyon Transmigration kind of make sense. These are some of the oldest trap cards you can activate from the hand, and they're also anime support, with Delta Crow supporting Blackwings and Tachyon Transmigration supporting the Galaxy Eyes cards. It also helps that these archetypes also saw revivals during the Arc 5 era, where both of these archetypes got a reimagining, an updated version of themselves. As for Red Reboot though, that's a little bit different. Red Reboot was initially released in 2018, then got limited in early 2020, before getting banned in October of 2022. Now in the TCG, if a card's banned, chances are it doesn't get a reprint, because after all, why reprint a card if you can't play with it? Aside from special collections and sets focused on older formats, such as Rarity 4, which released a couple months back. I guess what I'm saying is, in those 4 years, Red Reboot got printed out 5 times, which places it like Infinite Impermanence, having multiple copies released within a year. But yeah, that's all 24 hand traps that are actually trap cards. If I missed any, please feel free to talk about it, and yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Okay, yeah, catches.